Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this week's Confident Parent Moment. My name is Dr. Victoria, and I'm so excited that you are here with me today. I wanted to really dedicate this week's Confident Parent Moment to the topic of yelling and children and families, and what happens when we yell at kids and why it's ineffective. Now, it's a really big topic with the families I work with, because a lot of the times when life is pressured and we're living a big life and we're busy and we're professionals and we're raising kids and we have families, one way or another, we're going to have an experience of bursting at the seams and yelling, whether at one another or at the kids or just at someone that is driving the wrong way on the highway. Right? So yelling sometimes is part of how we communicate our frustrations, our anger, when we communicate that we don't like something or that something is not being done the way that we expect it to be done. And if it's not you yelling, right, or yelling at kids, oftentimes I'm experiencing parents who have partners that yell. So one way or the other, we are touched by others who express themselves when they're frustrated through raising their voice and yelling. And so I really want to talk about this because we all have heard that yelling is not effective, and we all have heard that maybe there are better ways to communicate, but I want to dedicate a little bit of time to this specifically to share with you exactly why yelling is ineffective. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I really wish that my partner, my husband, or my wife really heard this, guess what? You could just share this confident parent moment with them, because I'm sharing something with you very candidly that I share with many of the people that I work with. And it's going to be up to you whether or not you take this information and make it work for you. So whatever you do, it's your life, it's your family, and it's also the trajectory of how your kids learn how to actually communicate their needs and get their needs met. So first and foremost, yelling is, for the most part, super ineffective. And I'm going to share with you that when you yell at your kids for not being logical or not being responsible or not thinking about what it is they have to do before they do it, right? Whatever you're yelling at them about, they're not moving fast enough. They're not shutting off their electronics when you're asking them to. They're not running up to dinner the way that you want. Whatever it is, when you yell at your kids, it actually hijacks. Imagine a hijacker, okay? Your yelling hijacks the part of their brain that's actually responsible for logical, reasonable thought. So let me say that again. When you yell at your kids and you create a sense in them where they jolt up, right? And they become a little bit afraid, or they start to kind of, get a little bit nervous. That part of the brain that is becoming super active is the part of the brain that's responsible for fear and anxiety. And some of you might say, well, that's a good thing. I want them to be scared of what's going to happen. Okay. But I want you to remember that when you do that over and over and over with your children, they start to become scared in response to you. And that is not the same as utilizing their rational, logical part of the brain. It's not the same as that. And it doesn't nurture their ability to actually think about their actions, to actually think about what they're going to say or do. What it does is it creates a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, where they're going into this mode of doing what you want them to do, but it comes from fear. And that is not the healthiest way to go about nurturing a rational response in your children. So first and foremost, it's ineffective because it's not actually nurturing the part of the brain that we want to nurture, that logical, reasonable part, okay? Secondly, when you always yell at your children, or most often when you share what is not going right by yelling at them or by, screaming at them, they start to think, you know what? I don't have to take mom or dad seriously unless they're yelling at me. The only time they really mean it is when I hear their voice escalate. And then it becomes this subconscious thing to kids. They're on their Nintendo or they're on their, Switch, or they're doing whatever it is they're doing. They're reading a book or they're on their phone with their friends or whatever it is. And unless they hear your voice or the pitch of your voice, go another octave, they don't listen. Why? Because they learn that you're not being serious unless you're yelling. So if you want your kids to just listen to you when you're yelling, okay, but that's really what you're teaching them. What you really want instead is for your children to understand that when you yell or when you scream, it's because there's an emergency. There's something going on that warrants you to yell or scream, right? If something's going on, the fire alarm is going off in your house and everybody, what do? They go, oh my God, what is that, right? Why? Because the fire alarm doesn't go off all the time. We're not used to it. So when it goes off, we pay attention. So I want you to think about your yelling or screaming as that fire alarm. Only use it when it's serious emergency, when it's really vital that they really listen to you. Otherwise, kids are going to get used to your yell as something that is just the way that you communicate. Okay. And also they think that it's a way that they should communicate. So they actually learn from you. I talk about this all the time. You want to lead with love. And part of leading with love is leading them to actually understand that you can communicate what it is that you want without raising your voice. You can communicate happiness, joy, upset, calm, irritability, frustration, a request, all without yelling, right? And when you actually are able to model that with your partner or just with your kids, if you're a single parent, right? When you're on the phone with your co-parent, if you're a co-parent, and you're able to model in front of the kids that you can make a request or say how you feel by being calm and regulated, right? And actually saying it in a way that does not involve yelling or screaming or putting anyone down, that models to them that, hey, you can have your emotions and respond in a regulated way at the same time. That being frustrated or irritable is not the same as yelling, right? Being frustrated and irritable is a state that you are in. It's an emotion that you're feeling. It's something that's going on, and how you respond can also be regulated. We don't have to get dysregulated. And the last thing that I'll say is this. This is not a advice that or suggestions that now that you know it, you have to be perfect at it. Remember that even though I'm saying that yelling is ineffective, so many of us adults, right, come from cultures and backgrounds where we were raised with our parents doing the best that they could possibly do, right? And sometimes they yelled. And so I want us to just have some grace with ourselves, that if you end up yelling or screaming at your children or at one another, this isn't like you screwed it up and, you'll never be good at it. It just means that you have some work to do around thinking about, how do I want my children and how do I want my family and how do I want my culture in the family, the culture that I can, co-create with my partner, with my kids, to go. And even though your parents are maybe amazing, right, or your upbringing, whether your childhood was really challenging or whether it was really good, regardless of how you were raised and how your parents were, you have the opportunity to actually create what you want for your family without feeling pressure that it has to be the way that you grew up. And so if yelling was part of your upbringing and it's something that you have to unlearn, that's okay. And if you screw up and you yell, guess what? The most important lessons are sometimes learned when we screw up and then we repair. When there's a rupture and we're able to actually have the opportunity to repair. So the next time you catch yourself yelling instead of modeling a regulated response, catch yourself and you can say to your kid or your partner, you know what? I realized I did the same thing I usually do. Can we try that again? Right? Because that tells your kid, wow, right? Like my dad or my mom, right, caught themselves and they acknowledged, right, that we still need to do this, but they They acknowledge that they could say it a different way. And what that shares with your children and your partners and your friends and whoever you're communicating with is that you respect them, and that you respect yourself, and that you respect your communication, and that you're willing to look at yourself. And then that actually creates a space and an opportunity for others to look at themselves. And what a wonderful family life it would be if all of us were able to look at ourselves and take responsibility for how we show up. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here for this conversation. It was a really, really important one. If you liked this or this resonated in any way for you, please let me know. Write me. I always like to hear it. And if there is someone in your life that you're thinking really needs to hear this, just share this video and, spread the love. As my mother always used to say, and I often share, the more you share, the more you have. So share this goodness with everyone in your life that might benefit. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time for the Confident Parent Moment. Bye, everyone.